Hi everyone. So I gained access to a lot of non-disclosed information from World Open War, um, like a whole spreadsheet, all the information, every single game, all the players, everything, um, including the summary of how it had all played out. And today I'm going to disclose some of that information, the things that I can do without naming any names. So today I will talk about what we can learn from World Open War. It's the biggest event so far where we have all these numbers, all these statistics that we can actually start to sort of figure out a little bit of how important is your list, how important is the player skill, how important is the matchup, all of that. We have a little bit of info here, where we can start doing a little bit of meta hammering on that, statistic hammering, if you will. And I've been doing that. I ran this by one of my teammates who is better at Excel spreadsheets than I am, and I talked to Russell, the TO of World Open War as well. So it's pretty clear that this is what we're doing. This is what we're seeing. What I'm going to show you today. I have a whole PowerPoint of all my results and what I've found out. But at the end, I will show you some of the raw data. So if you want to see some of that raw data, go to the very end of this video, where you can pause the button. I'm not going to deliver this to you. I'm not going to hand it out, but you can just pause it there and just look over the data that I present to you, um, if you want to. I'm not going to put it anywhere on the internet or anything, because I don't think that's necessarily massively helpful. So, how much is skill? How much is list when you play bolt action competitively? That is it. That is the debate here. And the data is all from World Open War. And let's start with the disclaimers here. There's a lot of stuff here that is inaccurate or subjective. That's that I admit this completely. Um, because for one, ranking players, which I am going to do here, and which Russell did as well, and I'll get back to how it was done, but it's highly inaccurate, right? The ranking goes from 1 to 5, with one player being a new non-competitive player or a bad player, a 2 being a non-competitive player, a rivet counter, someone who's a hobbyist or just a casual player who doesn't go to tournaments at all, a 3 being the average tournament player-ish, someone who goes to tournaments and wins some games, a 4 being a strong tournament player who will often go to tournaments, who will often place in the top half, and who will have won some tournaments, and a 5 being like the top best players in the world. That's the ranking. This is extremely subjective, and it's not very gritty. You can already see that, right? It lacks a certain. There are nuances to all of these, which is why a lot of the players you'll see were ranked 3.5s or 4.5s or whatever. Um, it's also very, very subjective. It's what we think about them. But it's not just me being subjective here, because um, I rank players according to this, about how I think they place in this 1 to 5, but my team does it, and all captains who attended the World Open War were actually asked to give a little bit of feedback about their players, so that the TOs could rank them in the tournament, that the teams could be ranked according to how strong the players were. So all captains actually gave in the feedback here. So it's basically everyone here who is being subjective. Does that make it better? No, not at all. But it's what we can do, and it's not just one person's opinion, which I kind of like in some respects. Um, and of course, this will have to be modified based on what we see here. But I know that Russell did modify some of the player ranks according to what he had seen people perform in tournaments before. So that is the disclaimers about the player ranks. What we saw was that the top 10 players, we had 3 of them who were ranked 5s in the world. 5 were ranked 4.5s, so very strong players, and 2 were ranked 4s, strongish players, but not the best. So the top 10 players were all very strong competitive players. Their lists, however, 3 of the lists were ranked 4s, 3 lists were ranked 3.5s, so competitive lists, but not the best competitive lists. I mean, a 4 is a strong competitive list that could still be changed in minor ways to maybe improve it. A 3.5 is an okay-ish strong, and a 3 is an average tournament list. So a lot of the lists that were taken here were 3 lists in the top 10 ranking. That was one of the things that surprised me a little bit, that the player ranks, they were all very strong players, and you'll see in a minute when we go through the other tops that the strongest players finished up in the top half, but the lists themselves were way more spread out. So that was the top 10 players. Again, by the way, lists also highly subjective. It's just our opinion about how good the lists were. But I will say, I think I'm of course locked in a meta. What I think is good, I'll give everyone that. I am completely locked in my own meta, what I think is good. But having done this channel for quite a while now, I sort of have built up a sense of what I can see other people doing, because I've done so many list reviews. I've reviewed so many tournaments by now. I've seen so many tournament lists. I don't think that there are many people in the world who are better at evaluating list rankings than me. So if you are, please come onto the channel. I would love to host you. Um, but so I think I'm pretty good at that. And I did not rank the lists myself. I ranked them together with my team, who are also very used to ranking lists. So our list rankings may not be completely accurate, but it's the best we can get. The top middle pack, what we saw there was that there was one 5 ranker who was a bit of an anomaly. He didn't do as well as we had predicted just in his the player rank. There was quite a few. There was 6 ranked 4, 6 ranked 3.5ers, and 1 that was an average tournament player. 1. The rest are strong tournament players, or very strong tournament players, or the best in the world. So if you want to come in the top half of World Open War, the most competitive tournament for 3-man bold action in the world right now, then you're going to need to be a very, very good player. You're going to need to be a strong player, a player who often finishes in the top 10, or you're going to be one who often wins tournaments. That is what we're seeing with the player ranks. So for me, the player ranks seem very, very accurate. As for the lists, again, we saw a huge spread. There were quite a few 4-ranked lists, 7. There were 5 3.5ers and a single 3 list. So there were 3 lists in spread out among the top here, but not that many. If we go and look at the takeaways for that, 5er players were 75% likely to be in the top 10. If people had ranked you a 5er player, you were 75% likely. Of course, there were only very few fiver players, right? There were 3 or 4. So it's 4, 4. There were 4 fiver players. So I mean, just 3 of us ending up in the top half, and that's 75%. If you were 4.5, you were 100% likely to end up in the top 10. So that says to me that if you are highly ranked as a player, it is extremely likely that you will end up in a good placement. The 4 players were 22% likely to end up in the top 10, simply being pushed out by stronger competitors, 5ers and 4.5ers. But the 4 players were 78% likely to be in the top half of the pack. So again, if you're a strong player, you're very, very likely to finish well in the top half. Now, if we go into the bottom and look at them, the player ranks, there were only one 4-ranked player who ended up in the bottom middle. That's not a lot. That is very, very clear for me that highly regarded players where their peers think they are really good, they will typically do well. There were 5 3.5ers, so they are strong players. There were 5 3 players, and there were 2 2.5ers and a single 2er. I think that 2er, he was probably underrated a little bit. I think he was a little bit better than the rankings showed. But again, this shows that you are going to have to be at least a competent player to end up in the bottom middle, unless you want to end up in the bottom 10, right? The lists themselves, again, had a they weren't that different from the ones that were in the bottom half. Sorry, the top half. There were 3 4 lists. There were 8 3.5 lists, so lists that we thought were strong competitive lists, and 3 lists that were average competitive lists. The lists at World Open War were all of them good. There weren't really any lists where we felt like this is a bad list. And there were very few players who ended up being, I mean, being rated as not good players. So again, we have, I mean, this spread of lists that you're seeing here is more or less the same that we saw in the top half, right? It's not that different. You have some 4 lists, you have some 3.5 lists, you have some 3 lists. It's the same. It's the same as the top 10, basically. Look at the top 10 again here. Some 4 lists, some 3.5ers, and some 3 lists. Exactly the same. The bottom 10 players, we had a single 3.5er in the bottom, who obviously was an outlier, who didn't do as well as expected. We had a single 2.5er, 4 2ers, which were non-competitive players who had found their way to the World Open War because they were gents and wanted to play, and because somebody needed them or whatever. Because there were new players who wanted to get into the competitive scene, whatever. Someone had ranked them a 2, and most of these 2 or 2.5s ended up in the bottom 10. Only one player was ranked a 1, and he also ended up in the bottom 10. That's a completely new player who doesn't really know that much. But again, the lists weren't that bad. There were no four lists, like lists that couldn't be improved at all, strong competitive lists. But you did have a lot of 3.5s, which are lists that are strong competition lists, and could easily end up in the top half. And 6 3er lists, so no 2 lists. So the takeaway here for the bottom players was that all the 1 to 2.5 ranked players were 100% likely to end up in the bottom half. 100%. All of them did. Again, saying to me that it's people can tell whether a player is good or bad, and that will actually determine where they end up in the tournament, in the bottom half or the top half. 3 ranked players were 83% likely to end up in the bottom middle and 16% likely to end up in the top middle. So average tournament players going to World Open War were very likely to be outplayed by very, very strong, good competitive players, because the field was just so good. 3.5 ranked players were 50% likely to end up in the top middle and 42% likely to end up in the bottom middle. One outlier, as I talked about before. So again, I'm saying that this, for a lot of these players, it's fairly easy. Once you know the players, it's fairly easy to predict where they will end up in such a tournament format here. Just only based on knowing the players, not looking at their lists, you're fairly likely to guess right here. So, list ranking, disclaimers for that. It is, as I said before, highly meta dependent. I am, of course, locked in my own meta. What people think other places is highly meta dependent. What you think is good is always dependent on your local meta, what you're seeing played there. And again, it is highly inaccurate. Because it's subjective. It's our opinions. It's our opinions, but our opinions here are based on our experience. So the more experience, the better it is. So that's it. I think, and I just talked to Russell about this. I think one of the things that I end up doing is I underrate some of the lists. I think that they're worse than they are. He may overrate them a little. I think he does. And I think it's, for me, it's I like lists that have a very clear idea about what they want to do. Mono build lists, whereas a lot of UK players like lists that have a lot of moving parts, a lot of different elements. So there may be something there in how I rank lists and how other people rank lists. Who's right? We don't know. But if we look at the top placed lists, in the top 10, we had 3 lists that were 4 ranked, 3 lists that were 3.5s, and 4 that were 3 ranked lists. That doesn't tell us that much, does it? If we look at the top middle, that was 8 4s, 5 3.5s, 1 1 3 list. And the takeaway for me here is that the 4 ranked lists were 21% likely to enter in the top 10, but 79% likely to end up in the top half. So really strong. So building your list really strongly is also a good indicator. But notice here, the 4 ranked players were 100% likely to end up in the top half. The 4 ranked lists were a little bit less than 80% likely to end up in the top half. So take away that from that what you will. I don't know. 3.5 lists were 40% likely to end up in the top half and 60% likely to end up in the bottom half. Again, what can we take from that? Good competitive lists were being knocked down into the bottom half routinely at this event. If we look at the bottom middle lists, 3 were 4s, 8 were 3.5s, and 3 were 3s. And at the bottom 10 lists, 4 were 3.5s and 6 were 3s. So the average here of the lists is a little lower than the top. 3 ranked lists was 35% likely to be in the top half and 65% likely to be in the bottom half. So can lists tell us anything? Yes, absolutely it can. But for me, it is significantly lower than player ranking. But how much of that is down to inaccuracy? I don't know. So, in summary, player ranking is highly accurate. We are really good at predicting top and bottom placements, right? Between 75 and 100% accurate. That is really good. The middle pack, the 4s and 3s, that was the middle pack at World Open War, right? They were more difficult to predict, and they had a larger spread with more outliers. And player ranking is also highly accurate at predicting the bottom half for 1 and 2 players. 100% accurate. Strong lists, 4s, were most likely to end up in the top half, 75%, and comparatively weak lists, this being very much comparatively, 3s, because they're not weak lists, they're just average tournament lists. They could end up anywhere. That could be anywhere 35% were in the top half, some of them were in the top 10. And 65% were in the top half, bottom half. So they could end up wherever. So I think if you have a decently built list, you can go to a tournament and do well. I'm actually doing this experiment tomorrow. This is the evening before I go off and play in a tournament where I am bringing a 3 list and a 3 nation. And personally, I'm ranked as a 5 right now, having won World Open War, right? So that will be an interesting experiment. Can I end up in the top placements just by having a good skill level? Now, here at the end, I wanted to show you, just a sec, I will, wait a minute, what did I show you? Yeah. Here at the end, I wanted to show you the statistics that I talked about. And this is what it's all based on, really. So here we go. This is the spreadsheet. And I want to, can I just enhance this for a little bit? Right, I'm just going to blow this up quite a lot. Right. So what you can see here is the ranking of the players. And remember, this was a team event, so you can't really take that much from this ranking. Players were not individually placed as such. This ranking is based on strength of schedule and on results. That gave a power ranking, which you can see over here. I blocked it out because I didn't want to show that. So you can see the ranking of the players. You can also see the placement, the result. So I will give this away. The top one here is me. I was bringing my Brits. I am a 5 player ranked. My strength of schedule was 23.5, which is rather high. I think the highest was this one down here, 24.5. But obviously, if you end up in the top placement, you're not going to have the biggest strength of schedule because everyone else was doing a little bit worse than you. People had ranked my list as a 4, and the combined power ranking of me as a player and my list, that ended up giving me a 9. So that is how you read it. I just add the player rank to the list rank to a combined rank. Why is this a 3? That is not right. Something is off here. That is supposed to be an 8. Right. So you can see that in the top 10 here, the players are in a combined rank here of 8, which is a lot higher than most other people if you go down. Right. So if that's the top 10 here, if we go down and take the top half, you can see that there is 1 or 2 outliers. We have a 9 ranked player down here, who obviously didn't do as well as expected. We have an 8 ranked player here. The rest are 7 or 7.5ers in combined rank here. And you can see that the strength of schedule varies between, I think the lowest in the top half is a 16.5, and the highest is the 24.5 here. Yeah, once we go down into the bottom here, you can sort of see that the combined ranks drop a little bit to start with here, but we still have one 8 player here who also obviously didn't do as well as expected. He had a pretty good strength of schedule, but this Japanese player here had a very, very strong one as well. And then we go down into the very, very bottom here, and you can see how the combined ranks are dropping as I scroll down, right? Once we get down to those in the very bottom, they're a combined rank of 4. So they were clearly outmatched. Their strength of schedule, though, is not bad at all. There's many of them are still in their 20s in the strength of schedule. By the way, don't ask me how strength of schedule is calculated. It's something to do with the amount of points you scored, and then the player rankings you faced. Something to do that. Russell knows that. I just know that the strength of schedule was calculated somehow. I have no idea. So I haven't really used that much. I used obviously the results. I use the player rank and the list rank, and then the combined rank here is also kind of fun to see how it's really obvious once you get down there. There are a few outliers, but mostly once you get down into the bottom, it's really obvious that a weak player with an average list is not going to do well. It doesn't happen. They're going to lose. So I wonder if there's any like weak-ish players with really strong lists. Can't see any. We have a weak-ish player here with an okay list. They did obviously okay. Yeah. But you can also see that some really good players can do average like, right? This is a 4 player, this Soviet player here, whose list is ranked as a 4 as well, and they came 28. So out of 48. So a little below the middle. So that is the statistics for you guys to drool over if you want to go and check that out. I'll advise you find some some coffee, and I'll just make it really small so that you can see the whole screen. If you want, you can do a print screen or like take a picture of that. So that was it for me. That was the last update I had for you guys on World Open War. Um, I, I'm just, this is part of how I sort of try to analyze how am I good enough at analyzing what goes on at a tournament? Can the methods that I'm using, like player ranking and list ranking, can they tell me something? And it seems as if they can. Mostly the player ranking. The player ranking seems to be more and more accurate, whereas the list ranking is uh, between 60 and 75% accurate, which is okay and can say a lot, but doesn't say everything. Of course, the most accurate would be us knowing both list ranks and player ranks, but as you can see, that even that doesn't guarantee a result, right? We had outliers. We had some people, not the low end, but in the high end, we had some people doing significantly worse than they were ranked to do. So that was it from me. I hope you enjoyed this one, although it was very dry and a lot of like stats and stuff. But it's the first time we've had this good statistics on a tournament, and that was really interesting for me to go through. So I will see you in the next video. Cheers.